We have multiple New York Rangers updates to go over today. After a huge and must-needed win, we have one player that made his impressive season debut, as well as some bad news on the injury front that will have Rangers fans fired up. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the New York Rangers, whether that be trade rumors, trade reports, obviously the playoff push heading into this year's playoffs, it's free. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Now, a huge win last night, and I wanted to focus on that first before we get into some bad news and some thoughts on Brendan Othmann, who made his Rangers season debut yesterday after a long awaited, I believe it was a season debut. I obviously didn't get into the lineup to start the year and has been dealing with some injury troubles down there in Hartford, but a big win. And for any of you who are WWE/F or WCW fans, after last night, I think it's safe to say that the Click is back, baby. They've been reincarnated in the form of Matt Rempe, Johnny Brzezinski, and of course Brendan Othmann. The Click is back. This was a nice post-game photo from the boys, and I think that everyone is, attributing this to the Click, obviously, in wrestling, but I think it's they're making the Wolves for the Hartford Wolfpack, a couple guys from the Wolfpack, so love that. And they made a huge difference last night. Brzezinski with an amazing game. It seems like he was always in the right spot last night. He gets 2 goals. Could have had a hat trick. Matt Rempe tips one of the pucks in, doing his thing in front of the net. He was playing physical, and I thought Othmann had a very strong game yesterday for his first game back in the NHL. So that was very encouraging. But what's not encouraging is a couple of the things that happened during the game. Ultimately, they won 5-1. So yes, great, but a couple things to note. K'Andre Miller left the bench, left the ice, and there was no noticeable injury on the play. There's a clip going around on Twitter today about his last shift, and there was nothing noticeable that would have taken him out the game, which is, I think, pretty concerning to a degree, because if you think about it, usually the non-contact injuries are the worst ones. So hopefully, he's okay, but he was not on the bench at some points last night. So we'll keep an eye on his status. And they kept losing defensemen throughout the rest of this game. Schneider went for a spin to the dressing room. He came back. Fox then remains out of the game, remained in the room. K'Andre Miller has been ruled out with a lower body injury last night. So they lose K'Andre Miller. They lose Adam Fox. Both did not return. We don't have any definite updates at this time right now in terms of their status heading into Friday night's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, which the Toronto Maple Leafs are also dealing with a couple injuries themselves. So that's going to be an interesting game. The Rangers need to win that one. But losing Fox, losing K'Andre Miller, not great at this point in the season. Obviously, having Schneider back, that's going to be huge. Not losing him, I should say, due to injury is going to be huge for this team. And before we get into some takeaways, hopefully, again, we don't have an official update, but hopefully it is nothing serious with them. And in terms of defense, I wanted to shout out this: with 19 points, 2 goals, 17 assists this season, Ryan Lindgren has established a single season career high in points. Lindgren has 6 assist points / points in his last 5 games. So congratulations to Ryan Lindgren on a new career high. Unfortunately, I believe that your time as a New York Ranger may be coming to an end, and the Rangers are going to be able to kind of sell high on this player, having one of his best offensive seasons of his entire career, but at the expense, of course, of defense this year. So just wanted to shout out that, and I think that he probably is on his way out of town. Now, a couple takeaways from Remy Mashry in terms of the game last night. The Rangers, big 5-1 win over the New York Islanders. A couple words from Brendan Othmann to Brzezinski. He said, "I'm really happy for him. He deserves it." Brzezinski had a great game last night. He's a really good player, and he's finally getting an opportunity to play at the NHL level. I think he's an honest player, and you know what to expect of him every day and every night. And that's true. You know exactly what to expect from him. He's not going to score you a bunch of goals. He doesn't have the upside of like an Artemi Panarin, let's say, but you know exactly what you're going to get from him. He's going to play hard, and he's an honest player. I think that was a great, honest assessment from Brendan Othmann, actually. And, he said he works hard and he has a really good release. I'm happy to see he's getting some success and getting some recognition. He had a great game last night. I mean, every goal he scored was essentially the same, but it seemed like he was always in the right spot. He was putting it to the net, doing all the things that the Rangers need to do, doing all the right things. And in the second period, the Rangers built on their lead with goals from JT Miller and Matt Rempe. JT Miller leading the way once again. Another goal. He's been fantastic since coming over in that trade. Again, looking like a pretty good trade. Obviously would have liked to see them retain some salary, but looking like a pretty good trade. Nonetheless, the other thing I wanted to highlight too is in last night's game against the New York Islanders, the Rangers recorded 47 hits. It was a physical game. They were playing physically. This is this type of stuff that I want to see. Miller leads the way. Rempe's doing his thing, right? This is the style of play that's going to win you playoff games, right? And we saw it last year. They were not physical enough against the Florida Panthers. So this was the most hits in a game since March 9th, 2021 at Pittsburgh, where they recorded 58 hits. It is the fourth highest hit total in the NHL this season. So it was a very physical game in that way, and I would like to see more of that from the New York Rangers as we head towards the playoffs. And one last thing we'll mention before we wrap up here is Brennan Othmann. He made his, obviously, I don't want to say debut with the Rangers. We've seen him before, but obviously he's back in the NHL. He was called up. Chris Kreider could not go last night. He didn't even take the warm-up, so clearly dealing with a back injury. Brennan Othmann did end up getting into the lineup, and I thought he had a great game. He almost scored, right? He had a couple good chances. He was making things happen, and he was on the ice for a couple goals as well. So it's exciting for sure, Othmann said, to be able to know that the staff has that kind of trust in me to come into the lineup and be a part of this run. It's an honor. I'm hoping I can get into the lineup and play my game. He didn't expect to be called up either. Obviously, Chris Kreider's dealing with an injury. I expected him to get called up. He's been playing great. Not to call him up at this point of the season would have been a mistake. And I think that's just part of being a pro hockey player at times. Othmann said on his sudden call up, in all sports, you just got to be ready at any given time, and you don't really know what's going on. 1 hour you could be somewhere, and the next hour you could be somewhere else. You kind of just have to take each hour by hour with caution and basically wait to hear for the call. So that's exactly what he did all day yesterday. He finally got the call closer to game time. He got into the game, and like I mentioned, I thought he had a pretty solid game, and I think that he's going to be a pretty good player for the Rangers down the stretch this season. You take a look at his stats so far this season. In 27 games with the Hartford Wolfpack, he had 12 goals, 8 assists. Most of these, by the way, coming in the last couple of games. He's really turned it on recently. As he came back from injury, it was a little slow out of the gate, and obviously a little slow to start the season. But recently, he's really turned it on. 20 points in 27 games. So I feel like he's a guy injecting some youth into the lineup that may help the Rangers in their push for the playoffs this year. But it's going to be very interesting to see what the Rangers do the rest of the way. I think they're going to continue to try and get younger, call some guys up from Hartford like Brett Berard that I've mentioned before, and inject some youth into this lineup while trading away a couple UFAs. It's going to be interesting to see what Chris Drury does in the next week. The trade deadline is about a week away at this point. It's going to be very exciting. And let me know what you think in the comments about the game last night, the defense, the injuries, and obviously Brennan Othmann. Been a big fan of his. If you have to trade him in a trade that makes sense, that could help you, get better right now while also kind of staying young, like not trading for a guy who's, older than 30, let's say, I think that maybe you take a look at that. But for the most part, I think you just stick with this guy. I think you let him develop, continue to play his game, and I think he's going to be a pretty good NHLer. And we'll see what he does the rest of the way this season. But I would like to see a bunch of the young guys get some experience in the playoffs if the Rangers continue this push to make the playoffs. But let me know what you think in the comments, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.